Marcus Wellington had everything money could buy. At 35, he owned the largest cattle ranch in Montana, spanning over 50,000 acres of pristine wilderness. His great-grandfather had struck oil on the property in the 1920s, and 3 generations of smart investments had turned the Wellington family into one of America's wealthiest dynasties. Marcus lived alone in his sprawling mansion, a monument to success that felt increasingly hollow with each passing year. The house required constant maintenance, and Marcus had employed several housekeepers over the years. Most lasted only a few months before the isolation, and his demanding standards drove them away. That changed when Isabella Rodriguez arrived 6 months ago. She was different from the others, quiet, efficient, and seemed genuinely content with the solitary work. Marcus rarely interacted with her beyond leaving notes about specific cleaning requirements or schedule changes. Isabella arrived every morning at 6 sharp, worked diligently until 4 in the afternoon, and left without fanfare. Marcus appreciated her reliability, though he knew virtually nothing about her personal life. She appeared to be in her early 40s, spoke with a slight accent that suggested she wasn't originally from Montana, and drove an ancient pickup truck that somehow managed to make the 20-mile journey from town every day. What Marcus didn't realize was how much Isabella had transformed his home. The mansion had always been clean under previous housekeepers, but Isabella brought something more. Fresh flowers appeared in carefully chosen locations. The massive library, which Marcus rarely used, was organized not just alphabetically but by genre and era. His late mother's piano, dusty and neglected for years, was polished to a shine that reflected the morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows. One particularly cold Tuesday morning in November, Marcus noticed Isabella moving differently. She seemed to favor her left leg, and when she thought no one was watching, he caught her gripping the banister tightly while climbing the stairs. Her face was pale, and she took longer breaks between tasks. Marcus felt an unexpected pang of concern but said nothing, unsure how to approach the subject without seeming intrusive. The next day, Isabella called in sick for the first time since she'd started working. Marcus found himself oddly unsettled by the empty house. He'd grown accustomed to the subtle sounds of her work, the gentle hum of the vacuum, the soft footsteps moving through the halls, the occasional clink of dishes being arranged. The silence felt oppressive. When Isabella returned the following day, she seemed even more fragile. Marcus watched from his office window as she struggled to carry cleaning supplies from her truck. Something was clearly wrong, but Isabella continued working with the same quiet determination that had impressed him from the beginning. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. That afternoon, instead of retreating to his office as usual, Marcus decided to follow Isabella discreetly as she finished her daily routine. He told himself he was simply concerned about her well-being as an employer, but deep down, he knew his motivation was more complex. After months of sharing the same space while remaining strangers, he felt compelled to understand the woman who had brought such subtle warmth to his cold, empty home. Marcus maintained a careful distance as Isabella completed her final tasks of the day. She moved through the mansion with practiced efficiency despite her obvious discomfort, straightening cushions, checking that all windows were properly locked, and ensuring every surface gleamed. He noticed details he'd never paid attention to before. How she gently adjusted the family photographs on the mantelpiece. How she took extra care with his mother's antique vases. How she always left his coffee cup positioned perfectly for the next morning. At exactly 4 o'clock, Isabella gathered her supplies and headed for the door. Marcus watched from an upstairs window as she loaded her cleaning materials into the bed of her battered truck. She stood beside the vehicle for a moment, pressing her hand against her lower back and taking several deep breaths before climbing into the driver's seat. Instead of heading directly toward town as she usually did, Isabella turned onto the old logging road that wound deeper into the valley. Marcus felt a surge of curiosity mixed with concern. That road led to the abandoned mining settlement that had been deserted since the 1960s. There was nothing there but empty buildings and memories of Montana's rougher past. Marcus grabbed his keys and followed at a distance in his Range Rover, keeping far enough back to avoid detection. The winding dirt road was treacherous, full of potholes and loose gravel that would be challenging for Isabella's aging truck. He couldn't understand why she would take this route, especially when she seemed to be struggling physically. After 20 minutes of careful driving, Marcus crested a hill and saw Isabella's truck parked outside what had once been the settlement's general store. The building was one of the few structures that remained partially intact, though its weathered wooden siding and sagging roof spoke of decades of neglect. Marcus pulled behind a cluster of pine trees and grabbed a pair of binoculars from his glove compartment. Through the lenses, he watched Isabella emerge from her truck carrying 2 large bags that appeared to contain groceries. She moved slowly but purposefully toward the old building, fishing a key from her pocket. Marcus felt his confusion deepen. Was Isabella living in this abandoned structure? It seemed impossible. The building couldn't possibly have electricity or running water. As Isabella disappeared inside, Marcus noticed smoke beginning to rise from the building's chimney. Someone was definitely living there, and Isabella was either visiting them or. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Isabella wasn't just visiting this place, she was going home. Marcus remained hidden for another hour, watching as warm light began to glow from the building's windows. The scene looked almost cozy despite the ramshackle surroundings. He saw shadows moving inside, suggesting Isabella wasn't alone. The mystery deepened, and Marcus found himself consumed with questions about the woman who had been silently taking care of his home, while apparently living in conditions that bordered on primitive. As darkness fell, Marcus finally retreated, but his mind raced throughout the sleepless night that followed. The next morning, Marcus found himself watching Isabella with new eyes. She arrived promptly at 6 as always, but now he noticed things that had escaped his attention before. Her clothes, while clean and pressed, were clearly old and had been mended multiple times. Her boots were worn thin, and he could see where she'd carefully repaired small tears in the leather. Most telling of all, he observed how she discreetly wrapped leftover food from his kitchen, slipping items into her bag when she thought no one was looking. Marcus felt an uncomfortable mixture of shame and admiration. Here was a woman who took such pride in her work, who transformed his house into a true home, while apparently living in conditions that he couldn't even imagine. The contrast between his excess and her evident need struck him profoundly. He spent the day researching the old mining settlement, learning that the buildings had been abandoned when the copper mine closed in 1967. The area had no modern utilities, no proper road maintenance, and was technically classified as uninhabitable by the county. Yet Isabella had somehow made it her home, and she wasn't alone. Those shadows he'd seen suggested she was caring for others as well. That afternoon, Marcus made another decision that surprised even himself. Instead of following secretly, he would drive directly to the settlement and offer his help. Whatever Isabella's situation was, he had the resources to improve it dramatically. The decision felt right in a way that nothing had for years. Marcus loaded his truck with blankets, non-perishable food, and basic medical supplies. As he drove toward the settlement, he rehearsed various approaches in his mind. He needed to be careful not to seem condescending or intrusive. Isabella was clearly a proud woman who had been managing her circumstances with dignity and determination. When he arrived at the old general store, Marcus saw Isabella's truck parked outside, but he also noticed two other vehicles, a rusted sedan and a motorcycle that had seen better days. The reality of Isabella's situation was becoming clearer, and it was more complex than he'd imagined. Marcus knocked gently on the weathered door, his heart pounding with nervousness. He heard quiet voices inside, then footsteps approaching. When the door opened, Isabella's face registered complete shock, followed quickly by embarrassment and something that looked like fear. "Mr. Wellington," she stammered, instinctively moving to block his view of the interior. What are you doing here?" Behind her, Marcus caught glimpses of what had once been a commercial space, transformed into living quarters. Sleeping bags were arranged on the floor, camping equipment was stacked against the walls, and a small camping stove provided the only source of heat besides the fireplace. But most shocking of all were the faces peering around Isabella, an elderly woman who appeared to be in her 70s, and two children who couldn't have been older than 10 and 12. "Isabella," Marcus said gently, "I think we need to talk." Isabella's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. She stepped outside and closed the door firmly behind her, clearly wanting to shield the others from this unexpected confrontation. Marcus could see her mind racing, probably crafting explanations or preparing for the worst, losing her job, facing eviction from even this marginal shelter. "Please don't fire me," Isabella said quietly, her usual composure cracking. "I know this looks bad, but I can explain. I've never let my personal situation affect my work. I'm always on time, I do everything you ask, and I've never—" "Isabella, stop," Marcus interrupted gently. "I'm not here to fire you. I'm here because I'm concerned about you and because I want to understand what's happening." Isabella studied his face carefully, looking for signs of judgment or anger. When she found only genuine concern, some of the tension left her shoulders. She glanced back at the door, then made a decision that Marcus could see was difficult for her. "The woman inside is my mother, Alina," Isabella began, her voice barely above a whisper. "She has dementia, and the medications she needs cost more than I make in 3 months. The children are my nephew and niece Tommy and Maria. Their parents died in a car accident last year, and I'm their legal guardian now." Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Isabella continued, her words coming faster now, as if a dam had burst. "We lost our apartment 6 months ago when Mom's medical bills got too high. The kids were going to be placed in foster care, separated from each other and from me. I couldn't let that happen. I found this place and figured out how to make it work temporarily while I saved money for a proper rental. But Mom got worse, needed more expensive treatments, and I've been barely keeping our heads above water." The weight of Isabella's burden hit Marcus like a physical force. While he lived alone in a mansion with more rooms than he could use, this woman was caring for 3 other people in an abandoned building with no running water or electricity. She was doing all of this while maintaining his house to perfection, never once asking for help or even hinting at her struggles. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus asked. "I could have helped. I can help now." Isabella shook her head firmly. "I don't take charity, Mr. Wellington. I work for what I get. Always have, always will. Besides, rich people don't usually want to hear about their employees' problems. Most just want the work done and prefer we stay invisible." Marcus realized that Isabella's perception of him was probably accurate based on how he'd behaved over the past 6 months. He'd treated her as exactly what she described: invisible help, rather than a human being facing extraordinary challenges with remarkable grace. What if I told you that your work has meant more to me than you realize? Marcus said carefully. What if I said that helping you wouldn't be charity, but rather a long overdue recognition of how much you've given me? Isabella looked skeptical, but Marcus could see a tiny spark of hope in her eyes. Marcus spent the next hour inside the makeshift home, meeting Alina, Tommy, and Maria. Alina was a sweet woman whose mind wandered in and out of clarity, but during her lucid moments, she spoke with obvious pride about Isabella's strength and dedication. Tommy, age 12, was quiet but observant, clearly trying to be the man of the family despite his young age. Maria, 10 years old, was more outgoing and showed Marcus the drawings she'd made of their adventure house, as she called it. The children had been attending school sporadically, walking the 5 miles to town when weather permitted and Isabella could spare the time to drive them. Their grades were suffering, and Marcus could see the stress wearing on all of them, despite their attempts to remain positive. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying their company. It had been years since he'd experienced the warmth of family conversation, the gentle teasing between siblings, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with others. Isabella had created something remarkable here, not just survival, but a loving home under impossible circumstances. When it came time to leave, Marcus made his proposal carefully. "I have a solution that might work for everyone," he said. "The mansion has an entire wing that hasn't been used in years. 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room. It's completely separate from the main house, like an apartment. You could live there with your family, and in exchange, you could continue managing the main house as you do now." Isabella's immediate response was to shake her head. "I can't accept that. It's too much, and I couldn't afford to pay rent on something like that." "What if the arrangement also included covering Alina's medical expenses?" Marcus continued. "And getting the children enrolled in the best schools in the county, with transportation provided? And what if your salary increased to reflect the full scope of what you actually do, which is far more than just housekeeping?" Marcus could see Isabella wavering, torn between her pride and the obvious benefits for her family. Alina, who had been listening from her chair by the fire, spoke up in a moment of clarity. "Mija," she said to Isabella, "sometimes angels come in unexpected forms. This man sees what you've done, how hard you've worked. Maybe it's time to let someone help us for once." Tommy and Maria looked at their aunt with hopeful eyes, and Marcus could see the exact moment when Isabella's resistance crumbled. The decision wasn't really about her. It was about giving these children a chance at a normal life and getting proper medical care for her mother. "There would have to be rules," Isabella said finally. "Clear boundaries, defined responsibilities, and a written agreement. I won't be treated like a charity case, Mr. Wellington." "Marcus," he corrected gently. And you're absolutely right. This should be a proper employment arrangement that benefits everyone involved. As they shook hands, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. The transition took place over the following weekend. Marcus arranged for professional movers to transport the family's few belongings, while Isabella supervised the preparation of the mansion's east wing. Watching her direct the movers with quiet efficiency, Marcus realized he was seeing a different side of her, not just the deferential housekeeper, but a natural leader who had been managing complex logistics under extreme pressure for months. Elena's room was set up on the ground floor to minimize her need to navigate stairs, with direct access to a small garden that Marcus had never paid attention to before. Tommy and Maria each got their own bedroom for the first time in their lives, and their excitement was infectious. Marcus found himself helping Tommy set up a desk area for homework and showing Maria how to adjust the blinds to get the best light for her artwork. The transformation was remarkable. The wing that had stood empty and lifeless for years suddenly hummed with activity and warmth. Marcus could hear laughter echoing through the halls, the sound of Elena humming old songs in Spanish, and the gentle chaos of children settling into a stable home. On Monday morning, Isabella arrived at the main house at her usual 6 o'clock, but everything felt different. She moved with more confidence, and when Marcus encountered her in the kitchen, their interaction had an ease that had been missing before. "How is everyone settling in?" Marcus asked, genuinely interested in the answer. Maria couldn't sleep because she was too excited about having her own closet, Isabella replied with a smile that transformed her entire face. Tommy spent an hour just running hot water in his bathroom sink, and Mom, she had her clearest conversation in months last night. I think the stress of our living situation was making her condition worse. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since his parents' deaths, his house felt truly alive. But the real changes were just beginning. Later that week, Marcus received a call from Dr. Patricia Hayes, the neurologist he'd arranged to evaluate Elena. The news was better than anyone had dared hope. With proper medication and a stable environment, Elena's cognitive decline could potentially be slowed significantly. Tommy and Maria were enrolled at Willowbrook Academy, the county's top private school. Marcus arranged for a car service to transport them daily, ensuring they'd never miss classes due to weather or transportation issues. Their teachers reported that both children were remarkably resilient and intelligent, simply needing consistent support to thrive academically. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself looking forward to the small interactions with Isabella's family. Elena would wave to him from her garden, where she'd begun tending to flowers with surprising skill. Tommy would occasionally seek him out with questions about ranch operations, showing a keen interest in business and agriculture. Maria left small drawings on his desk, pictures of horses, mountains, and happy families that never failed to brighten his day. The arrangement was working perfectly, but Marcus was beginning to realize that something deeper was happening, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and what he wanted from life. 3 months into the new arrangement, Marcus began to notice subtle changes in his daily routine. Instead of taking his morning coffee alone in his study, he found himself gravitating toward the kitchen where Isabella prepared breakfast. Their conversations started as simple exchanges about household matters, but gradually evolved into more personal discussions. Isabella revealed more about her past, how she'd worked multiple jobs to support her family after her husband died in Afghanistan, how she'd sacrificed her own dreams of becoming a teacher to care for others, how she'd never regretted those choices, but sometimes wondered what her life might have been different. Marcus shared his own struggles with loneliness and purposelessness, admitting that his wealth had become more of a burden than a blessing in recent years. Alina's condition continued to improve under the care of specialists Marcus had arranged. During her lucid periods, she would tell Marcus stories about Isabella's childhood, painting a picture of a young woman who had always put others' needs before her own. These conversations helped Marcus understand the depth of Isabella's character and the sacrifices she'd made throughout her life. Tommy had taken a particular interest in the ranch operations, and Marcus began giving him informal lessons about cattle management, land stewardship, and business principles. The boy had a sharp mind and asked insightful questions that often challenged Marcus to think about his practices in new ways. Maria, meanwhile, had transformed the family's wing into a gallery of her artwork, and Marcus found himself studying her drawings with genuine appreciation for her talent. The household had developed new rhythms that included everyone. Sunday dinners became a family affair, with Isabella cooking traditional Mexican dishes that filled the mansion with wonderful aromas. Marcus contributed wine from his extensive cellar and stories about his travels, while the children shared their school experiences, and Alina offered wisdom from her long life. But it was during a particularly difficult week in April that Marcus truly understood how much his life had changed. Alina had experienced a setback, becoming confused and agitated for several days. Isabella was exhausted from managing her mother's care while maintaining her work responsibilities. Tommy was struggling with a challenging school project, and Maria had caught a spring cold that left her miserable. Without thinking, Marcus stepped into the chaos and began helping in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. He took over Alina's care one evening, patiently reading to her in his rusty Spanish until she calmed down. He helped Tommy with research for his project, sharing resources from his extensive library. He made soup for Maria and sat with her while she rested, reading stories aloud until she fell asleep. Isabella found him that night in the kitchen, cleaning up after the long day. "You didn't have to do all of that," she said quietly. "This isn't your responsibility." "Yes, it is," Marcus replied, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "You're my family now, all of you." The words hung in the air between them, both of them recognizing that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship and in Marcus's understanding of what family meant. Spring turned into summer, and the Wellington Ranch became a place of joy and purpose in ways Marcus had never imagined. Isabella's influence extended far beyond housekeeping. She had transformed not just the physical space, but the entire atmosphere of the property. The gardens bloomed under Alina's careful tending, the house filled with the sounds of children playing and learning, and Marcus found himself looking forward to each day with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Tommy had become Marcus's unofficial apprentice, spending afternoons learning about ranch management and showing a natural aptitude for both the business and practical aspects of cattle ranching. Marcus began to see possibilities for the future that hadn't occurred to him before. Perhaps the ranch wouldn't die with him after all. Maria's artwork had evolved from simple drawings to sophisticated pieces that Marcus had professionally framed and displayed throughout the house, creating a warm, personal gallery that impressed every visitor. But it was his relationship with Isabella that had undergone the most profound transformation. Their morning conversations had become the highlight of Marcus's day, and he found himself sharing thoughts and feelings he'd never expressed to anyone else. Isabella, in turn, had revealed dreams and ambitions she'd set aside years ago, including her desire to eventually open a small restaurant featuring her grandmother's recipes. One evening in late June, as they sat on the main house's expansive porch watching Tommy teach Maria to ride one of the gentler horses, Isabella broached a subject that had been weighing on her mind. "Marcus," she said carefully, "I've been thinking about our arrangement. It's been wonderful, more than I ever could have hoped for, but I worry that we're taking advantage of your generosity. This can't be what you imagined when you offered to help us." Marcus turned to look at her, noting how the setting sun highlighted the strength in her profile and the gentleness in her eyes. "Isabella, what I imagined was helping someone in need. What I got was something much more valuable. I got my life back. Before you and your family came here, I was just existing, going through the motions of living without any real purpose or joy. You've given me something I didn't even realize I was missing." But what happens when Alina doesn't need full-time care anymore? When the children are grown and don't need a guardian? What happens to this arrangement then? Marcus had been pondering the same questions, and he'd reached a conclusion that both thrilled and terrified him. "I hope," he said slowly, that by then we'll have figured out a way to make this permanent, not as an employer and employee, but as something more. Isabella's breath caught, and Marcus saw his own hopes and fears reflected in her expression. They both understood that they were standing at a crossroads that would determine not just their immediate future, but the rest of their lives. "I don't want you to feel obligated," Marcus continued. "Your security here isn't dependent on anything other than our friendship and my respect for you. But I also can't pretend that my feelings haven't changed, or that I don't hope yours might have as well." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, watching Tommy patiently guide Maria through the basics of horsemanship. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "They have changed, Marcus, more than I ever expected or thought was possible. But I need you to understand something about me. I don't make decisions lightly, especially when they affect my family. This isn't just about what I want, it's about what's best for all of us." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility Isabella carried and admiring her for it. "Then we take it one day at a time," he said. "No pressure, no expectations beyond what we have right now. We see where this leads us." As if sensing the importance of the moment, Alina appeared on the porch, moving with more clarity and purpose than she'd shown in months. "Mija," she said to Isabella, "that man looks at you the way your father looked at me 50 years ago. Sometimes the heart knows things the mind hasn't figured out yet." The summer progressed with a sense of growing anticipation and deepening bonds. Marcus found himself taking on more responsibilities with Alina's care, not because Isabella asked him to, but because he genuinely enjoyed the elderly woman's company. During her lucid periods, Alina shared stories about her youth in Mexico, her courtship with Isabella's father, and her insights about love, family, and resilience. Tommy's interest in ranch operations had evolved into a genuine passion, and Marcus began formal mentoring sessions that covered everything from animal husbandry to sustainable land management. The boy had a natural gift for understanding complex systems and often surprised Marcus with innovative suggestions for improving ranch efficiency. Maria's artistic talents continued to flourish, and Marcus arranged for her to take lessons with a renowned local artist. Her work began to reflect not just technical improvement, but also a sophisticated understanding of light, composition, and emotional expression that impressed her instructor and delighted her family. But it was the small moments that told the real story of their evolving relationships. Marcus teaching Isabella to play piano on his mother's old instrument, their fingers brushing as he guided her through simple melodies. Isabella surprising Marcus with his favorite dinner after a particularly challenging day dealing with ranch business. The entire family working together to plan and execute a surprise birthday party for Alina. whose joy and clarity during the celebration reminded everyone why their sacrifices had been worthwhile. As autumn approached, Marcus realized that he could no longer imagine his life without Isabella and her family. The mansion that had once felt like a mausoleum now pulsed with life and purpose. More importantly, he had discovered a version of himself that he liked, someone who was needed, someone who could contribute to others' happiness and well-being. One crisp October evening, as they worked together to prepare Elena's medications and tuck the children into bed, Isabella and Marcus found themselves alone in the kitchen. The comfortable silence between them had become charged with unspoken possibilities, and Marcus sensed that they were approaching another crucial moment in their relationship. "Isabella," Marcus began, his voice unusually hesitant, "I've been thinking about what you said this summer about not making decisions lightly. I want you to know that I've been thinking just as carefully about what I want and what I can offer." Isabella looked up from the medication organizer she'd been preparing, giving him her full attention. "I know that what we have now works well," Marcus continued, "but I also know that I want more, not just for me but for all of us. I want to be part of this family officially, permanently. I want to wake up every morning knowing that we're building something together, not just maintaining an arrangement." Isabella set down the pill container and moved closer to him, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "What exactly are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying that I love you," Marcus replied, the words feeling both natural and momentous. "I love your strength, your dedication, your kindness. I love how you've transformed not just my house but my entire understanding of what life can be. And I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." Isabella's response wasn't immediate, and Marcus found himself holding his breath as he watched emotions play across her face. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, as if she were testing each one before letting it out. "Marcus, 6 months ago I was living in an abandoned building, working multiple jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Now you're offering me a life I never even dared to dream about. Part of me wonders if this is all too good to be true, if I'm setting myself up for heartbreak by believing in something this beautiful." She paused, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens where Elena spent her mornings tending flowers. "But then I watch you with my mother, how patient you are during her difficult moments, how you celebrate her good days like they're victories. I see you with Tommy, not just teaching him about ranching but really listening to his ideas and treating him like his thoughts matter. I watch you encourage Maria's art and help her believe in her own talent." Isabella turned back to face Marcus, and he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "I see a man who has learned to love my family as much as I do, and that tells me everything I need to know about your character and your intentions." Marcus felt his heart pounding as Isabella stepped closer to him. "I love you too, Marcus," she said simply. "I love your gentleness with people who are vulnerable, your generosity that goes far beyond money, and the way you've grown into the man I think you were always meant to be. But more than that, I love how we are together, how we've created something that's bigger and better than either of us could have managed alone." When Marcus kissed Isabella for the first time, it felt like the culmination of months of growing intimacy and the beginning of something entirely new. The kiss was tender and full of promise, carrying the weight of all the unspoken conversations they'd had through shared glances and small gestures. "So what happens now?" Isabella asked when they broke apart. "Now we figure out the details together," Marcus replied. "We talk to the children and make sure they're comfortable with how our relationship is changing. We make sure Alina understands and approves. We take our time and do this right." Over the following weeks, the family held several important conversations about the changing dynamics of their household. Tommy, with the wisdom of a boy who'd grown up quickly, observed that Marcus had been acting like a father figure for months already, so making it official seemed natural. Maria was thrilled at the prospect of Marcus becoming her uncle, and began planning elaborate wedding scenarios that involved horses, flowers, and the prettiest dress in the whole world for Isabella. Elena's response was the most touching of all. During one of her clearest moments, she took Marcus's hands in her weathered ones and said, "I have watched my daughter sacrifice her own happiness for years to take care of all of us. You have given her back the chance to be not just a caregiver, but a woman who deserves to be loved and cherished. For that, you have my blessing and my gratitude." As winter approached, Marcus and Isabella began planning a simple wedding for the following spring, when the ranch would be at its most beautiful, and Alina would hopefully be having more good days than difficult ones. The winter months brought their own challenges and joys. Alina's condition remained stable under her new treatment regimen, with more frequent periods of clarity that allowed her to participate actively in family life. Tommy's grades at Willowbrook Academy had improved dramatically, and he was being considered for advanced placement in mathematics and science. Maria's art teacher had recommended her for a special program for gifted young artists, an opportunity that would have been impossible under their previous circumstances. Marcus and Isabella spent the quieter winter evenings planning their wedding and discussing their vision for the future. They decided on a small ceremony in the mansion's main hall, with Alina's garden providing flowers and the entire extended ranch community invited to celebrate. Isabella's dream of opening a restaurant had evolved into plans for a catering business that could operate from the ranch's commercial kitchen, serving both local events and providing an additional income stream that would make her feel more financially independent. But perhaps the most significant development was Tommy's growing involvement in ranch operations. The boy had demonstrated such aptitude and genuine passion for the work that Marcus began seriously considering him as a potential successor. The idea of the ranch continuing under the care of someone who truly understood its value and potential gave Marcus a sense of legacy he'd never expected to achieve. One snowy February evening, as the family gathered around the fireplace in the main house, Marcus realized that he was experiencing something he'd read about but never understood: perfect contentment. The scene before him represented everything he'd unknowingly been searching for. Alina dozing peacefully in her chair, Isabella reading beside him while absently running her fingers through his hair, Tommy working on a school project at the dining room table, and Maria sketching by the fire's light. "Penny for your thoughts," Isabella murmured, noticing his contemplative mood. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago," Marcus replied. "A year ago, I had everything I thought I wanted but nothing I actually needed. Now I have everything that matters." Isabella smiled and squeezed his hand. "It's funny how life works out sometimes. If you told me last winter that I'd be planning a wedding to a millionaire cowboy, I'd have thought you were crazy. But now I can't imagine any other future." Tommy looked up from his homework. "Marcus, I've been thinking about something. After I graduate from college, would you consider making me a full partner in the ranch operations? I know I'm just a kid now, but I really want to learn everything I can about this business." Marcus felt a surge of pride and affection for the boy who'd become like a son to him. "Tommy, I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I've been hoping you'd want to stay involved with the ranch long term. We should start talking about setting up a formal internship program for your high school summers, and maybe you can study agricultural business in college." Maria looked up from her sketch pad with a grin. "Can I paint a picture of the ranch to hang in your restaurant, Isabella? I want to paint it so it shows how beautiful it is when the sun comes up over the mountains." These moments of casual family planning and shared dreams represented a future that Marcus had never dared to imagine, but which now seemed not just possible but inevitable. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came the final preparations for Marcus and Isabella's wedding. The ceremony was planned for the first Saturday in May, when the ranch would be at its peak beauty. Isabella had chosen a simple but elegant dress that reflected her practical nature, while still honoring the significance of the occasion. Marcus had his grandfather's ring resized for Isabella and purchased matching rings for Tommy and Maria, symbolically adopting them into the Wellington family name. Alina had been having more good days as the weather warmed, and she was determined to walk Isabella down the aisle, a role that carried deep significance for both women. The local community had embraced the family's story, and many of Marcus's neighbors and business associates were eager to attend the celebration. But the week before the wedding brought unexpected challenges. Elena suffered a minor medical setback that required hospitalization for several days. While the doctors assured everyone that it was a temporary issue related to medication adjustment, the incident reminded the family how precious and fragile their time together was. Isabella spent 3 days at the hospital with her mother, and Marcus found himself managing not only the wedding preparations, but also Tommy and Maria's emotional needs as they worried about their grandmother. The experience reinforced for everyone how much they'd come to depend on each other and how truly they'd become a family. On the Wednesday before the wedding, Alina was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health and strict instructions about her medication schedule. Her first request was to see the wedding preparations, and Marcus proudly walked her through the mansion's main hall, which had been transformed with flowers from her garden and elegant decorations that managed to be both festive and tasteful. "It's perfect," Alina said with tears in her eyes. "Isabella is going to be the most beautiful bride Montana has ever seen."